Having coffee this morning downstairs with the meditators, and it reminded me of a British officer who was posted to Nigeria, and he was very renowned for the lovely coffee he served at his parties. So one day his guests had to know how the coffee's done, so they sent for the cook, this native cook, and so they asked him how to make coffee. He says, boss, we take water, boiled water with milk, and then I put in the coffee. So they asked, because in Nigeria you don't get the fine coffee we get here, it's a very rough coffee. And so he says, how do you strain the coffee? So the native cook replies, I use my boss's silk socks. So here the officer got very angry, and he said, what? You use my best socks? So the servant was terrified. He says, boss, me, no use of the ones. Good. Now let us have an deep philosophical question. What shall we talk about?
I can't reply. Guruji, Nastaka Samadhi. Is there any possibility of us reaching the stage of high evolution sphere? And in the event of us being able to reach this high sphere, will we be able to recognize this high sphere of evolution, Guruji?
You're talking of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Nirvi means not, Kalpa means thought. The Samadhi that takes a person beyond thought. Now, with that question, another question could be asked, what is true experience? What is the highest experience that a person can reach? And I will tell you emphatically. And this is a revolutionary idea that the greatest experience is no experience. Because all experiences are confined to the mind. Now, in a person's daily life, you have all kinds of experiences, good ones, nasty ones, and grosser ones and subtle ones. So only in the realms of the mind is experience involved. So a gross experience is from the conscious or grosser level of the mind, and a more subtle experience can be obtained through the subconscious, and the subtlest, the refined is relative, could be experienced through the superconscious mind. And the superconscious mind, all these three facets or aspects of the mind are totally interrelated. And that is why the experience of the superconscious mind, the subconscious mind, can achieve some recognition by the conscious mind, which in turn translates itself through the body. The body, mind is interconnected. There is no dividing line between the body and the mind. If I ask you, where is your mind? You could never say it in my big toe or in my head. For you are the mind. And when we look at it from the bodily aspect, then we are sure to know that the subtleness of the mind, which is also matter, and mind doesn't matter, is translated through the body. So the body is also mind, and so the final analysis, you are the mind. And the interpretation or the living of daily life is conditioned by various factors of your sanskaras of how much that subtle level, that superconscious level, will be portrayed and brought about in daily living. Now, when more and more through meditation and spiritual practices is brought about to the body, which translates itself into action through our five senses, hearing, touching, seeing, smelling, tasting, then we have experience. So, the more one could bring out or draw out from the inner layers of the mind, the more so-called happiness is received, and that we call experience, a happy experience, a joyous experience, or if not, in between the force of that flow, there are negativities or veils blocking that flow, then the fullness of it cannot be felt, and that is why we find certain experiences to be negative or miserable or unhappy. Now, these are the mechanics of the mind, which psychologists are still trying to unfathom. But the supreme experience is no experience, because you could never be conscious of the supreme experience. When I go into Nirvikalpa Samadhi, I am totally lost. I'm not conscious of the five senses. I'm not conscious of the mind in all these three aspects at all. And then I am in another sphere, the sphere of the spirit. And the spirit is not capable of experience. Only that which is limited is capable of experience, because experience too requires a comparison. You experience heat. How would you know you're experiencing heat if you cannot compare it with coldness? So here, in comparison between anything, you eat bland food or you eat curried food. Now, how would you know this is curried food if you cannot compare it with boiled food or the other way around? So here, what happens is this, that there is a duality. So only because of the duality, the dual existence of which the mind conceives, can one experience whatever experience there is to be had, be in this embodied being. While in the spiritual realm, when you merge into that which is beyond, then you are experienceless. It is the drop of water might experience itself falling down, to use an analogy, experiencing itself as falling down as rain. But when it falls into the ocean and merges with the ocean, then the experience of the drop is lost. There is no drop, so there is no individuality. So it becomes one with the ocean, and when the drop becomes one with the ocean, if the drop would talk, it will say, I am the ocean. When the individual mind merges into the universal mind, and the universal mind merges into the spiritual reality, then there is no experience. Now the spiritual reality is what we call divinity, and divinity is devoid of any experience. For if divinity should experience something, then automatically The analytical process is brought in and it falls into limitations, while divinity is limitless, without limitations. Now, if something is totally unlimited, there is no sphere for it, for any experience. It just is. It just is. In that total unified state, which is beyond the conscious mind, beyond the subconscious mind, beyond the superconscious level of the mind. Now, most philosophies, including the Vedanta, go to that level of the superconscious mind where you experience absolute knowledge, although it's a contradiction of terms, because knowledge is a quality of the mind, and how can it be absolute? Then they say absolute knowledge, absolute existence, another contradiction of terms, because existence interpreted by your mind can never be absolute. And then they talk of absolute bliss. Now, bliss is also something experienced by the mind, which is limited, so how can it be absolute? So the highest, which the highest philosophy can reach, is knowledge, existence, and bliss. But when we go to the field of nirvikalpa samadhi, then there is no existence, there is no bliss, there's no knowledge. You just are. And you'd be surprised to know that knowledge can be an impediment, an obstacle for you to merge away into the divine. For, as I said, and to repeat, because these are subtle points which require repeating, that exists, that divinity is beyond all experience. Therefore it knows of no knowledge, nor existence, or bliss. It is like electricity that does not know itself. And yet it's such a powerful force. But in its expression, it brings light, it brings coolness in the fridge or heat in the stove. So it becomes the manifestation, and it manifests itself into a grosser level, yet it not is the grosser level, and yet it is the grosser level too. Yes. So in the realm of mysticism or the spiritual field, this to the ordinary mind sounds very paradoxical. It says yes, it says no. For example, one of the injunctions in the Kena Upanishad says, the universe is unreal. Listen to this very carefully. Because the greatest minds in the world, minds, intellectualizing philosophers, have yet not been successful in interpreting it. Now this injunction says, the universe is real, the universe is unreal. Only God is real and the universe is God. The universe is unreal, only God is real and the universe is God. You see the paradox there, but it is really not a paradox. For reality and unreality both can coexist and interpenetrate each other. So our concept of reality is a limited reality, and that which is limited is unreal, for it is forever changing. Only that which is changeless is real. But now that is the realm of metaphysics. But bring it down to physical existence. The best man can do is to draw upon the highest level of the mind and allow it to infiltrate the conscious mind and live I. Joy and knowledge. That is not the end of that, the end of all. Nirvikalpa Samadhi, we are totally unconscious of everything, and you just are. And the unconsciousness comes about with the drop of water just merging away in the ocean. When you get upon the ocean, that which we see to be real are the bubbles. Many of the bubbles have their own reality in its own sphere, the erotosphere. But when the bubbles burst, or the waves subside, so the subsiding of the waves is the total emergence in the ocean, which means that the individual soul, the mental soul, the bodily soul, merges away in the spirit, and that is the final end one could achieve. And yet it is not an end, it is a beginning for the ocean, and you are the ocean then. Brings about waves, they make waves. And that is the unified state. You know, there was a young couple that got married and went to a hotel for a honeymoon. And so they in their room, beautiful suite. So, you know, the husband says, "Oh, my darling, my beloved, at last we are really one." So the wife, while patting her curls, says, to be on the practical side, if we are really one, we should order dinner for two. Now, no man could ever live in Nirvikalpa Samadhi for more than 21 days. No. Your entire body will disintegrate. Because when you go into total unconsciousness, which is beyond the superconsciousness, then naturally, being devoid of consciousness, the body and the mind has to disintegrate. But we want to live in this bodily form. We take a trip in Nirvikalpa Samadhi for a while off. A holiday away from the consciousness of life or the super consciousness or whatever. We go for a holiday and come back and be our normal souls. We enjoy the beautiful flowers and the trees and the birds and the bees and whatever goes in this worldly existence. But coming from there, we are a totally different path. And the greatest result it could produce, all the talks I give come from not intellectualization, although one has to use the mind to express the inner soul, although very, very inadequately. Everything I talk about comes from personal experience and drawing from that infinite source. Mind the people will be lucky enough if they can just draw from the superconscious, which is the quietest state of relative existence. But to draw from that which is beyond, then you can really live as a God on earth, a God-man. And yet, if you put it on a scale, the God will be heavier than man. In other words, You live more as the divine than as man. And yet you have all the characteristics of man. Enjoy a good meal, enjoy your Scotch and certificate bed nightcap, and all that. Enjoy it. Nothing wrong with that. But you have the constant remembrance every second of your life that divinity is in you. You are divine. And because of that, you find a total unified state of all existence as man knows it. Now, finding that total unified state, you become non-attached to the world, to be in the world but not of the world, as I've said many times before. And that is the secret of viewing the world in a different perspective, which we talked about yesterday. And then nothing can hurt you, nothing can harm you. If a man comes up to you and pierces a sword through you, you say, so what? Forgive them. For who has pierced the sword through me? I myself. But I'm not apart from him. He is an expression in this turbulent, tumultuous world that is expressing itself in a different form. And that is why Lord Jesus said, someone strikes you on one cheek, keep the other. For who is the striker and who is the recipient of the slap? There's no difference. The actor and the action are but one. The thinker and the thought are but one. The creator and the creature are but one. Now, these are not things that should just be intellectualized with only reaches the level of spine. These are things that could be on that level, where the mind is not necessary. We swim away the religion. You just are. And this one thing you do, the merging away that ocean, that you support the waves, you support all the boats and the ships sailing on you. You energize everything in existence, relative existence. You become the energy that gives life to existence. And that is the secret of Guru Shakti. It's really deep. Where, although you possess a bodily form, and having been connected and experienced that non-experienced state, you can bring about through the mind and body experience and pass it on to those that could receive it. It's like what the Bible says about seeds. Some seeds are thrown fertile land, some on barren land, and some on the rocks or the birds of the air. So the giving is, how much can the receiver receive? None. When we do our meditations and spiritual practices, we become greater recipients of Guru Shakti, which is grace. Now, so the only way to draw that grace is to become a good recipient. But if you are like a sieve, even though the grace is coming, it's just going to flow through. But when we are integrated, then we cease to be a sieve, and then we could contain that grace within ourselves and express it in our daily lives. I always try to take the highest physics and metaphysics to daily practical levels, because that is what people need. There was a young man married, he had 2 children. And from morning till night, he was just involved in reading philosophical books and metaphysical books. And he read all the ancient philosophers, Socrates and Plato and Pythagoras, all the Eastern ones, Yajnavalkya and Shankaracharya, all that. And from morning till night, he was busy with that. So his wife came to see me. Please speak to my husband. He's involved from morning to night in all these studies, and we are starving at home. There's no bread. And I spoke to this chap. I said, of course, this is divine. But how much have you been able to translate all those philosophies in day-to-day practical life? Are you doing your duties to you and yours and to the society that you live in? So it took me a bit of a while to convince him. And later when he started doing that, it was good knowledge that he has achieved, received and worked for. He put into practice and life became happy. There were no squabbles at home. So Nirvikalpa Samadhi is the aim of everyone, of total emergence while still in this body. Now that must be filtered through, and it would very spontaneously through the channels of the superconscious mind, going through the subconscious mind, burning of the seeds of karma, as the expression goes, coming to the conscious mind, where all thoughts are just right. All actions, even without thinking about them, without analyzing them, are just right. You come to a fork in the road and you will just take the right road at the fork. So life becomes spontaneous as the flower is. Nobody prods it on to grow. In other words, you become yourself. And then only can one answer the question, for no one will answer it for you. Only can you answer the question, who am I? Now, if I tell you that the answer to the question of who am I is you are divine, but that makes no sense. I'll tell you you're divine, and then you will think in your mind, oh, Guruji says I'm divine. All the problems and things I face, how can I be divine? Well, my wife scolded me for coming home late the other day, and this and that, and all the problems. The kids are out here putting on the hi-fi, and I can't stop it. Look at all this, how can I be divine? You are divine, but because you have not recognized your divinity, you will suffer all these surface waves of the ocean that you really are. Yes, we're talking of married life. Someone asked this young bride, how do you find married life? She says, no difference at all from when she was single. She says, half the night I used to wait for George to go home. Now, half the night I wait for George to come home. Yes. Nirvikalpa Samadhi is not something that can be explained or described. I can only tell you something about it. You can only know it when you experience it. the experience of non-existence. The experience, as Carl Jung would say, the unconscious. Although, of course, he was very limited in his rationalization because this cannot be rationalized. I gave a lovely talk on the shortcomings of Carl Jung's psychology. I gave a talk in America. You should really get a tape of it here. You find it very good, and I believe it has been published in the scientific journal. I did a talk at Vidya's home, and we had a lot of people there. And that's besides the point. So Nirvikalpa Samadhi is something that you cannot describe, but you can experience. Right. But what would be good, which can be lived in daily life, is Sarvikalpa Samadhi. The samadhi of not in the non-existence, but samadhi in existence. In other words, samadhi with form. And all religions do that. Samadhi with form, where you formulate a certain ideal or whatever. It could be a piece of stone. Like, for example, the Hindus have the Shivalinga, the form. It aids to the purpose of concentration. It aids to the purpose of becoming one-pointed. And if it is done in the form of Purushakti, you draw to your soul that infinite force that flows through the channel. Electricity is there in the water, but we could never have it here without the unread generator. Electricity in the water is abstract, but to draw that abstract to us, we need the concrete generator. And that is water. Buddha, Jesus Christ, all over the world. Krishna, all over the world. Generator. Or, having a bodied form, you can only be the generator. Because you're concrete and not abstract. But the generator is so powerful, it has the mechanisms there in that bodied form to draw that abstract power, that abstract electricity, and pass it on to us in our every room, in our every facets of our mind. The mind contains many rooms. But in this mansion, how many of the rooms are in such darkness? Perhaps one room has light. We have to light up all the rooms of the mind to feel the fullness of that beautiful mansion in the dark that even from a distance the place is lit up like a fairyland. Okay, what is the fairyland? This world. By lighting ourselves, we light up everything around us. And how do we light it up? Well, it's expressed through love. And that is how we love our neighbor as ourselves. For our neighbor is not a part of ourselves. Our neighbor is ourselves. And that is how all hatred disappears, animosities, the resentments will go away. And when these go away, what is left? Love and peace. Isn't that we want? For in the light of love and peace, that darkness of anxieties and distrust and animosities and resentments cannot exist. Darkness cannot exist in the presence of light. Yet it is there. But it is vanished. finite. Yes. So when the mind is lightened up by drawing from the divine force, and yet everything is the divine force. Everything contains the divinity, and not only contains it, but it is. For that isness is universal. And yet it transcends the universe. Realize the crowning beauty of what we call divinity. So as man can be in the world and yet not of the world, divinity is also in the world and not of the world. You see the sameness. That man and God are so similar. He too is in you and yet beyond you. You two are in the world and beyond the world. So yeah, we can see in everything the same pattern follows, the same pattern follows. For example, like our concept of the Trinity. You can analyze anything and you'll find the Trinity there. The Hindus, for example, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, creator, preserver, dissolver. Christianity, we find the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And there's a Trinity in everything. There's a Trinity in the body, the mind, and the spirit. Anything we can analyze, we can bring it down to the Trinity. Yet, when we say Trinity, it does not mean three different things. It means three different aspects of the same thing. For God is man, God is in Jesus and Buddha, but Krishna is there. And when he is totally there, then we can say that he is God. And that is what we mean by incarnation. The incarnations from earth are those that are filled, totally filled with the divine. All the rooms in the mansion of the mind are all lit up. And yet it can be so ordinary. I said a few times before, I didn't know where, that if our Lord Jesus should walk down the road, he might be arrested for vagrancy. So whose fault is it? Our fault, but not being able to recognize. And to be able to recognize, we have to be at that high stature, to have enough awareness to bring in us the recognition of that which is divine. It is only, there's an Indian beautiful saying, that it is only the jeweler that knows the worth of a diamond. Someone else might pick it as a piece of glass. Yes. So therefore, it is our duty to ourselves, for the peace in ourselves, to find that integration. And I could never stop emphasizing the value of spiritual practices and meditation. Do you want me to edit which one, would you? I wish you got some time. You know, I have a friend who loves smoking cigars. Big ones, you know. I don't know if you see in the audience. He loves cigars. So I was, his birthday was coming. So I was speaking to his wife, and I said, what did you buy for your husband as a birthday present? So she says, 100 big cigars. I says, but that must be expensive. How much do you pay for it? So she tells me, nothing. Nothing for 100 big cigars. So she says, well, for the past several months, I've been taking out one or two funny cigars. I didn't notice it. So when I give it to him on his birthday, he'll be very delighted that I bought the very brand he smokes. You know, this grand old lady was with a friend watching this parade going by. And this friend was from our country. So she says, well, there is the Duke and the Duchess in front. And behind them is the mayor and the mayoress. And if you look on the right-hand side, there is the vicar and the vixen. Don't think too much. It's very good brains. Yes, this John Dinglebook, he tells his secretary, Smithers cancel all my engagements. And so after a while, when he phones through, he says, Smithers, did you cancel all my engagements? He said, I did, so I cancelled all your engagements. But Lady Millicent wasn't happy because she said you were supposed to marry her next week. Yeah. Yeah, lyrical samadhi. That's what I go into when I do the communion practice. Good. Now, that is the ideal stage. But it takes years, perhaps even lifetimes to reach that. And could be the present moment. So what we need is greater and greater peace in life. What we need is to smooth out or iron out the wrinkles. And what could do that? Meditation, understanding, and both require some effort. And later you will find that at first, many times the person tells me, I can't sit down to meditate, Guruji. I should make some effort. And then later you will find that the effort becomes effortless. And you will look forward to the time to sit down and meditate. So effort becomes effortless. And in that effortlessness, you will find great activity happening within yourself on the subtle sphere. And then you will know the meaning of what has been said, to find action in action and inaction in action. Well, the greatest action is not necessarily a physical action. And that is only the grosser counterpart, where the greatest activity happens on a subtle level, inclined, where, especially in the subconscious mind, with the various sanskaras forever are trying to balance themselves. So if any suffering comes about, remember it is very, very good. Because that very suffering represents an unconducive sanskara coming out of you. You shedding off. So therefore, it is not something to be sad about. The man on the spiritual path will say, come what may. All is well, everything is good. And then suffering is nothing but an offering. We talked about this of acceptance and things. So, All our disappointments come about because of expectation. And expectations are mostly, if you analyze it closely, is nothing else but wishful thinking. I expect my son to be good to me, so I'm wishing for that. It's wishful thought. So expectation is another word for wishful thinking. Expecting means you are demanding a certain thing. I expect the customer to buy this overcoat and this rainy weather. The customer might not like it. Then you're disappointed. So, by having greater and greater integration in us, we become non-attached, and because of non-attached, there is no expectation. We take life as it comes, for it is always for our personal evolution and for our benefit. Some people who are not apparently, but who are genuinely happy, remember that they have worked hard for it. Perhaps not in this life they benefit, perhaps in a previous life. If I'm a spiritual teacher, do you think it is all gained in this life? If I have become one with divinity, do you think it's all in this one lifetime? No, there's so many hundreds of thousands of lifetimes might have been filled with effort. And likewise with everything else, with everything else. So the spirit, but a repair. The repair. To where you have to go to what you belong and to what you really are. Then you can love even those that wrong you. You love them. You don't even say a word against them. I've had this experience here in England, where people have taken my teachings and used it for their own means, very wrongfully, in a wrong way, for their own personal ego and selfishness and back pockets. I love them still. Nothing against them. Although, as a father, I could reprimand a child that you're doing wrong, my son. But it doesn't mean that I don't love them. But that is how after all, whatever people are doing, all the churches and splinter groups and everything, after all, in their own way, and they're talking of God. They're talking of goodness, perhaps. And then whenever they do it with a selfish motive. And as far as religions are concerned, the two most wealthiest institutions in the world is the church and insurance companies. The churches promise you heaven after you are dead, and the insurance promise you a lump sum of money after you are dead. I promise you peace here and now while you are living. But no spiritual master can just wave a magic wand. You wave it, the energy is flowing to you, but are you doing your bit? Are you meditating? Are you trying to gain better and better understanding? Are you instead of reading cheap novels, reading good books, having good thoughts in the mind? Are you progressing gradually from negative feelings to positive feelings? And so on. These things are important. So, we were talking about hope yesterday. Hope is never lost. No one is hopeless. For everyone is embodied hope as the manifestation of manifester. For the manifester could never bring a manifestation which is hopeless. Do you see the logic? You can only take out water. Water. And what is the difference between the water in your bucket and the water in the well? Same water. You are the water in the bucket, and the well is the one that's applied to water or your bucket. Divinity is you, and you are divinity. You in an individual form, like in a small bucket, and the divinity in a universal form, like in the wall. In its progress to go. Thank you. There's so many more jokes here now.